Karla Homolka is one of Canada's most notorious criminals. Along with her then-husband Paul Bernardo, she played a role in the sex killings of 2 schoolgirls and her 15-year-old sister.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gale Allett of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesthaven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. In the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence.
Some women don't just kill. They butcher, manipulate, and destroy with terrifying precision. One skinned her husband and hung his body like a trophy. Another orchestrated over 200 executions with a single word. But the most disturbing of all, a killer who walked free, despite her role in one of the most horrific crimes imaginable. Brace yourself. This is as dark as it gets.
The 1st of March 2000 is etched on the minds of the people of Aberdeen, Australia, forever.
Never before, and really never again, has there been a crime of this nature actually perpetrated by a woman.
A murder so inexplicably heinous, it still affects all of the officers called to the scene to this day.
Nothing could prepare you for what you were about to see.
Aberdeen, New South Wales, a quiet town where crime was rare. But on the 1st of March 2000, a crime so unimaginable unfolded that it would send shockwaves across Australia. When John Price didn't show up for work, his concerned co-workers called the police. Officers arrived at his home, knocking repeatedly. No answer. But what they saw through the window was enough to force entry. Inside, they walked straight into a horror scene straight out of a nightmare. John Price had been in a harmful relationship with Catherine Knight for years. A butcher by trade, a violent woman by nature, Catherine had a deep fascination with knives, violence, and control. Her past relationships were marked with threats, physical harm, and disturbing behavior. In one case, she had held a previous partner at knife point, demanding he take her back. In another, she slit the throat of his puppy as a warning. When Price finally tried to escape her grasp, filing a restraining order after one of her outbursts, he told friends that if he ever went missing, Knight was to blame. Sadly, he was right. On the night of February 29, 2000, Knight arrived at Price's home under the guise of reconciliation. What happened next was pure horror. She waited until he fell asleep, then launched her sadistic attack. Using a butcher knife, Knight stabbed Price 37 times. Deep, savage blows piercing vital organs. The sheer force of the attack sent blood spattering across the walls. But her twisted desires weren't satisfied. With chilling precision, she skinned his entire body, hung the flesh from a meat hook in the living room, and cooked parts of his body. She set 2 plates on the table, each labeled with the names of Price's children, suggesting she planned to feed them their father. It was so gruesome that hardened investigators needed therapy after witnessing the scene. Knight was found in a drugged state, having taken a handful of pills, likely attempting to stage a fake suicide. She was arrested immediately. During questioning, she claimed she remembered nothing, but the evidence was undeniable. Her trial was one of Australia's most infamous, with 0 possibility of parole. The judge, horrified by the details, declared she was too dangerous to ever be freed. She became the first woman in Australian history sentenced to life without parole. In court, Knight showed no emotion, no tears, no remorse, just a chilling blank stare as the crime was laid out in harrowing detail. The family of John Price sat in shock and horror, forced to relive the unimaginable pain of his final moments. While justice was swift, the trauma Knight left behind would never fade. Even behind bars, Knight remains a terrifying enigma. A woman so devoid of empathy that even hardened criminals fear her. She will die in prison, and the world is better off for it. Our next case takes us to the ruthless world of organized crime, where one woman rose to power through murder and cold-blooded executions. But what made her even more terrifying? She didn't even spare her own allies.
She was the largest cocaine importer at the time.
Known in cities across the US as the Godmother, for her mafia-like brutality. Gangland warfare has been raging across the city for 3 years.
Miami saw dramatic changes in the homicide rate. We went from probably 80 to 100 murders a year to almost 300 to 400.
In the heart of 1970s Miami, where money flowed like water and violence ruled the streets, One name sent chills through even the most hardened criminals: Griselda Blanco. She wasn't just a lord, she was the queen of retribution, eliminating anyone who stood in her way with ruthless efficiency. But her reign of terror didn't stop at business rivals. Even those closest to her weren't safe. By the time her empire crumbled, Blanco was linked to over 200 murders, including her own husband's, earning her the chilling nickname, the Black Widow. Blanco's criminal roots ran deep. She began her life of crime as a child in Colombia, running scams and kidnappings before diving headfirst into the trade. When she arrived in the US, she quickly dominated Miami's substance market, pioneering new smuggling methods and raking in millions per month. But with power came paranoia. Blanco trusted no one. She ran her operation with an iron fist, ordering brutal executions without hesitation. Drive-by shootings, assassinations in broad daylight. Miami's streets became a war zone under her rule, and law enforcement had had enough. The FBI launched Operation Banshee, an all-out effort to bring Blanco down. In 1985, their patience paid off. Agents arrested Blanco in California, charging her with 3 counts of first-degree murder. But even behind bars, her influence lingered. Authorities feared she was still orchestrating hits from her prison cell. And then came the most shocking twist. While she was serving time, prosecutors discovered evidence linking her to a dozen more killings, including a contract to murder a child over an unpaid drug debt. Despite the mountain of evidence, Blanco struck a plea deal, escaping the death penalty and serving only 7 years before being deported to Colombia. But karma wasn't done with her yet. In 2012, as she left a butcher shop in Medellin, a motorcycle assassin gunned her down, the same execution style she had used on so many of her own enemies. Griselda Blanco's legacy remains one of blood and fear. She wasn't just another cartel boss. She redefined the drug trade, proving that a woman could be just as lethal as any man in the underworld. And yet, in the end, she fell victim to the same world she created. Her story serves as a terrifying reminder that in the world of crime, loyalty is fleeting, and power always comes at a price. Our next case takes us into the twisted world of a woman who played a deadly game of deception. Her charm was a weapon, and her victims never saw the danger until it was too late. This is the story of Sheila Davalloo.
Answer, please. Hello. I think the guy is attacked my neighbor. You think someone attacked your neighbor? Yes. I heard yelling.
In 2002, a quiet Connecticut neighborhood became the setting for a twisted love triangle that would end in obsession, betrayal, and murder. Sheila Davalloo seemed like an ordinary, intelligent woman, until her deadly fixation on another man led to 2 violent attacks that no one saw coming. Sheila was married, but she had a dangerous obsession with her coworker, Nelson Sessler. The problem? He was already in a relationship with Ana Lisa Raimondo, and Sheila couldn't stand being second choice. For months, she carefully manipulated the situation, trying to sabotage Nelson's relationship. She called Ana Lisa's home, pretended to be other women, and planted rumors at work. But none of it was enough. Nelson remained committed to Ana Lisa. That's when Sheila decided to eliminate her competition.
It was a crime triggered by a lover's obsession, and it drove the police down a rabbit hole of dead ends and one big, strange twist.
On November 8, 2002, Ana Lisa was found brutally murdered in her Stamford condo. She had been stabbed multiple times and beaten, her home ransacked to make it look like a robbery. There were no immediate suspects, and the case quickly went cold. Sheila, meanwhile, acted as if nothing had happened, continuing her affair with Nelson, while still keeping her husband in the dark. But Sheila's thirst for control didn't stop at Ana Lisa. A year later, in 2003, she turned on her own husband. Sheila convinced Paul Christos to play a blindfolded game, then suddenly stabbed him twice in the chest. He barely survived, escaping and calling 911. While paramedics rushed to save him, Sheila made a shocking move. She called Nelson, not 911, as her husband bled out. That mistake exposed everything. Sheila was arrested for the attack on Paul and sentenced to 25 years, but as investigators dug deeper, they linked her to Ana Lisa's murder. DNA evidence, phone records, and her history of jealousy sealed her fate. In 2012, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
I'm claiming my innocence.
Not if Sheila Davalloo had her way.
But this is a case where I am being accused of killing somebody.
Sheila never showed remorse for her crimes. Even in court, she appeared cold and detached, refusing to take responsibility. Her story remains one of the most chilling cases of obsession turning deadly, where love, jealousy, and deception ended in bloodshed. And the scariest part, if her husband hadn't survived, she might have gotten away with it all. Our next case takes us to a seemingly caring nurse who was trusted with the lives of innocent children. But behind closed doors, she became a silent killer. When authorities uncovered what she had done, it left the entire medical community in shock.
Beverly Allett, a nurse whose mission to kill the youngest and most helpless patients in her care left a nation horrified.
With all eyes anxious for a glimpse of Britain's worst female serial killer,
the former nurse Beverly Allett begins a sentence without end tonight for murdering 4 children in her care and for injuring 9 others. She was given life 13 times over and was told there was no real chance of her ever being free again.
In the early 1900s, Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in England became the center of a terrifying mystery. Babies and young children, previously stable, began suffering sudden, unexplained medical emergencies. Some recovered, but others tragically didn't make it. Doctors were baffled, parents were heartbroken, and no one suspected the friendly pediatric nurse who was always at their bedside, Beverly Allett. Allett presented herself as a dedicated, caring nurse. She consoled grieving parents, reassured doctors, and seemed to be deeply invested in the well-being of her patients. But behind this facade, she was systematically targeting innocent children, injecting them with lethal doses of insulin and potassium, or suffocating them. Between February and April 1991, she attacked 13 children, killing 4 and leaving others permanently disabled. Yet, no one realized what was happening until the pattern emerged. As investigators pieced together the cases, they noticed an unsettling trend. Beverly Allett was present for every single emergency. The hospital launched an internal investigation, uncovering missing medical records and evidence of tampering. Suspicion quickly turned towards Allett, and when forensic testing confirmed that several victims had been deliberately poisoned, she was arrested.
Last night, 23-year-old Beverly Gale Allett of Grantham, a former nurse at the Grantham and Kesteven Hospital, was charged with 4 counts of murder, 8 counts of attempted murder, and 8 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. In the course of all of the interviews, she maintained her innocence.
Her trial revealed the full horror of her crimes. She had preyed on the most vulnerable, all while pretending to be their protector. The court heard chilling details of her calculated attacks and how she thrived on the chaos and attention they brought. In 1993, Beverly Allett was sentenced to 13 life terms for her crimes, making her one of the worst child killers in British history. She was diagnosed with Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where caregivers harm others to gain sympathy and attention. Instead of prison, she was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital, a psychiatric facility where she remains to this day. Families were left devastated. Parents who had trusted her now had to live with the unbearable truth that the person meant to save their children was the one who took them away. Allett has never shown true remorse. Even now, as she serves her sentence, there are fears she could one day be released, sparking outrage from the victims' families. She was supposed to heal the sick. Instead, she became one of the most notorious medical killers of all time. Our next case takes us to a woman whose ruthless ambition led her to orchestrate a cold-blooded execution. She didn't act alone. She pulled the strings from behind the scenes, manipulating others to do her dirty work. But when the truth unraveled, her fate was sealed.
And if Christy can hear me, if you can get away someplace, Christy, phone either home or the Niagara Police as soon as possible.
Is wanted for a series of assaults, 2 last May and 1 just last week. And police say his attacks always follow the same pattern.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Canada was gripped by fear as young women were vanishing, only to be found murdered. At the center of it all was Paul Bernardo, a man later exposed as the Scarborough rapist. But he wasn't working alone. His partner in crime? A woman who shocked the world with her cold-hearted participation, Karla Homolka. Karla wasn't just an unwilling accomplice. She was an active participant in the horrific assaults and murders of multiple victims, including her own younger sister, Tammy Homolka. What made this case even more disturbing was how she played the role of the perfect girlfriend and later, the devoted wife. Behind closed doors, she helped lure victims, cover up crimes, and manipulate those around her. By the time the authorities started connecting Bernardo to the violent crimes, Carla crafted an escape plan. She painted herself as a battered woman, claiming she had been a victim of Paul's mistreatment and had no choice but to comply. In 1993, Carla struck a plea deal, known as the Deal with the Devil, where she agreed to testify against Bernardo in exchange for a 12-year sentence for manslaughter. At the time, prosecutors believed her story, but everything changed when new videotapes surfaced. These tapes proved that Carla wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. They showed her laughing and enjoying the harm inflicted on their victims, but it was too late. Her plea deal couldn't be overturned. Paul Bernardo was sentenced to life in prison without parole, but Carla walked free in 2005 after serving her full 12-year sentence. She changed her name, moved, and even started a family, attempting to erase her past. But the public never forgot what she had done. Her attempts to blend into normal life only led to public outrage whenever her whereabouts were discovered. Karla Homolka's early release remains one of Canada's most controversial legal decisions. Victims' families, along with the public, felt betrayed by the justice system. How could someone so involved in such horrifying crimes be allowed to walk free? Even today, she lives under a cloud of suspicion, with many believing she never truly paid for her crimes. Her case serves as a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most dangerous people don't look like killers, but they are. Up next, Shay Groves, a woman whose obsession with true crime took a dark and deadly turn.
Serial killer-obsessed woman who stabbed her on-off boyfriend to death has been jailed for life with at least 23 years in prison. Shay Groves sentenced at Winchester Crown Court for the murder of 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald.
In the dimly lit bedroom of a serial killer-obsessed woman, a twisted fantasy became a horrifying reality. Shay Groves, a 27-year-old woman from Hampshire, surrounded herself with crime books, weapons, and chilling portraits of infamous murderers. To outsiders, her obsession was nothing more than a dark fascination. But in the summer of 2022, the obsession turned deadly when she brutally murdered her boyfriend, Frankie Fitzgerald. Frankie Fitzgerald thought he was in a passionate romance, but in reality, he was in a dangerous, toxic relationship with a woman living in a fantasy world. Shay, fueled by jealousy, manipulation, and a twisted sense of control, turned their home into a crime scene.
In the early hours of the 17th of July 2022, as Frankie Fitzgerald was asleep in her bed, she used a dagger to slit his throat and then she stabbed him 17 times.
On the night of the murder, an argument spiraled into a bloodbath. Shay, convinced Frankie was cheating on her, flew into a jealous rage. But this wasn't just a fit of passion. This was premeditated. With a dagger inspired by her favorite true crime stories, she stabbed Frankie 17 times, leaving him bleeding out on their bed. And as he took his last breaths, she lit a cigarette and calmly watched. The horror didn't end there. Instead of calling for help, Shay covered up her crime. She messaged her friend, boasting about the murder as if it was a scene from a horror movie. She even tried to stage the crime scene, making it seem like Frankie had attacked her first. But the truth was undeniable. Blood soaked the bed, the murder weapon was still in her home, and her own messages betrayed her twisted mindset. When police arrived, they found a woman disturbingly calm, as if she had just fulfilled some macabre fantasy. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a woman who blurred the lines between fiction and reality. Shay had idolized real-life killers, studied their methods, and ultimately became one herself. She attempted to play the victim, claiming self-defense, but the evidence was stacked against her. The jury saw through her lies, and she was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 23 years behind bars. As the verdict was read, Shay's cold demeanor finally cracked. The woman who once bragged about her crime now sat in shock. There was no way out, no manipulation left to play. For Frankie's family, the sentencing was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring him back. They had lost a son, a brother, a friend, to a woman who had turned her obsession into reality. Shay Groves reveled in her dark fantasies, but our next killer took a different approach, controlling others to do her dirty work.
It is a crime that sent shockwaves through this city. A 14-year-old girl stabbed to death in front of her own home by two teens embroiled in a sick plot.
In the winter of 2008, Toronto, Canada was blanketed in snow as families celebrated the New Year. But for one family, the night would end in horror. At just 14 years old, Stephanie Rengel had her entire life ahead of her. A bright, kind teenager with dreams of becoming a police officer. But as she stepped outside her home that night, She had no idea she was being lured into a deadly trap. Her killer wasn't a stranger, and the person who orchestrated it all, she never even lifted a finger. Melissa Todorovich was only 15 years old, but she was already dangerous. Not in the way most people imagine killers. There were no weapons, no physical violence. Instead, she used something far more insidious: manipulation. She had an obsessive need for control, especially over her boyfriend, David Bagshaw. But there was one thing standing in her way: Stephanie Rangel.
15-year-old Melissa Todorovich badgered her 17-year-old boyfriend David Bagshaw for months with an evil ultimatum: no sex until the girl she viewed as a rival was dead.
Melissa hated Stephanie, not because they were rivals, but because Stephanie had briefly spoken to David years earlier. That was enough. In Melissa's mind, Stephanie had to be erased. For months, Melissa poisoned David's thoughts, demanding he prove his love by killing Stephanie. If he hesitated, she called him weak. She threatened to leave him. She told him he was worthless. At first, David resisted. He knew murder was wrong, but Melissa never let up. She texted him, messaged him, pressured him relentlessly, until finally, he broke. New Year's Day, 2008. Stephanie Rangel received a message. David was outside. He wanted to talk. It was cold, but Stephanie didn't hesitate. She had known David. He wasn't a stranger. She stepped outside. David led her away from the house, down a quiet street. Then suddenly, he attacked. He stabbed her 6 times, then fled. But Stephanie didn't die right away. Even after the brutal attack, she tried to crawl back home. She never made it. As she lay dying in the snow, David sent one final message. He told Melissa it was done. Her response? She smiled. Melissa thought she was untouchable. She hadn't held the knife, so how could she be guilty?
Killing Stephanie might have been more your idea than his idea. Am I accurate? Yeah. Okay.
But investigators uncovered a chilling digital trail. Her messages to David left no doubt. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a premeditated killing, orchestrated by a teenage girl. During her trial, prosecutors exposed Melissa for what she was: a master manipulator who turned a petty grudge into a murder. The jury saw through her lies, and in 2009, Melissa Todorovich was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 7 years.
Todorovich was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced as an adult to life in prison with no chance of parole for 7 years. Bagshaw pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and is serving an adult life sentence with no chance of parole for 10 years.
Stephanie's mother sobbed as she described the unimaginable pain of losing her daughter in such a senseless act of violence. And Melissa, she barely reacted. Even in prison, her reputation remained chilling. She wasn't just a killer, she was a manipulator, a teenager who played puppet master and got someone else to do the dirty work. And an innocent girl paid the price. Melissa Todorovich used manipulation to orchestrate a murder. Our next case focuses on a cold and calculating woman who didn't just take part in a crime, she orchestrated an assassination.
61-year-old Donna Scrivo appearing tired and worn. The former nurse, the final witness, accused in the St. Clair Shores murder and dismemberment of her son Ramsey. Scrivo claimed a masked man killed her son and threatened her and her family with death if she told a soul.
In January 2014, a series of black garbage bags were discovered scattered along a Michigan highway. Inside, body parts. Authorities quickly identified the victim as 32-year-old Ramsey Scrivo, a man whose life had ended in unimaginable brutality. But the most horrifying part, the person responsible was his own mother. Donna Scrivo, a former nurse, had always been seen as a devoted mother. But behind closed doors, things were far from normal. Ramsey had been struggling with mental health issues, and Donna had even petitioned to become his legal guardian. But what seemed like a mother trying to help her son took a dark and twisted turn. On January 27, 2014, Donna reported Ramsey missing. But just days later, his dismembered remains were found stuffed in garbage bags, dumped carelessly along the roadside. Police immediately suspected foul play, and all evidence pointed back to Donna.
Yes, we're going to be releasing a picture of a person of interest that we hope citizens can hopefully help us identify, as well as a vehicle, which we'd also like to see if we can tie up.
Investigators searched Donna's home, uncovering a gruesome crime scene. They found bloodstains, a chainsaw, and cleaning supplies, all clear indications of a brutal killing and cover-up. The medical examiner confirmed that Ramsey had been drugged and strangled before his body was dismembered. Donna had then placed his remains in bags, driven around, and discarded them like trash. Security footage showed Donna purchasing a handsaw and cleaning materials just 1 day before Ramsey was killed, proof that this was premeditated. She was arrested on the spot. Donna Scrivo denied everything, claiming a masked intruder had killed her son and forced her to dispose of the body, but the evidence was overwhelming.
Prosecutors say she drugged and strangled her own child, cutting him up with a power saw and dumping his remains. The evidence not in her favor. Security video shows her buying the saw used to kill her son.
After a short trial, she was found guilty of first-degree murder, dismemberment, and tampering with evidence. The judge handed her a life sentence without parole, ensuring she would never walk free again. In court, Donna remained emotionless, even as the jury convicted her of murdering her own child. Ramsey's friends and family were left shattered, unable to comprehend why a mother would commit such a horrific act. Some believe Donna's controlling nature and unstable mindset pushed her to eliminate the very person she claimed to care for. One thing was certain: her cold, calculated crime made her one of the most disturbing female killers in recent history. Our next case is Catherine Magbanua, a Florida woman who was the key player in a deadly murder-for-hire plot. Her reaction to her life sentence will leave you speechless.
A new twist in the alleged murder-for-hire plot. Police in Florida arresting a single mom, accusing her of arranging the killing of a prominent Florida State law professor.
On July 18, 2014, Daniel Markel, a prominent FSU law professor, was pulling into his driveway in Tallahassee, Florida, when a gunman ambushed him in broad daylight. 2 shots were fired at point-blank range, execution style. Markel never stood a chance. But this wasn't a random killing. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by someone shockingly close to the family. At the center of it all, Catherine Magbanua. Catherine had once dated Charlie Adelson, Daniel Markel's former brother-in-law. After Charlie's sister Wendy divorced Markel, the family allegedly wanted him out of the picture, permanently. That's when Charlie turned to Catherine, who had dangerous connections. She introduced him to 2 hitmen, Sigfrido Garcia and Luis Rivera, and together they set their deadly plan in motion. For a $100,000 payday, Daniel Markel was as good as dead.
The driver's side window is all bashed in, and he's got blood all over his head.
The investigation spanned years, but when the pieces finally came together, the truth was chilling. Surveillance footage showed a Toyota Prius stalking Markel's home. Phone records linked Catherine to both the killers and Charlie Adelson. A secretly recorded conversation where Charlie and Catherine discussed coded details of the hit, laughing as if a man's life hadn't just been taken. The evidence was irrefutable. In 2022, Catherine Magbanua was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation of murder. She had set the plan in motion. She had collected the payment. She was just as responsible as the ones who pulled the trigger.
On count 3, the solicitation to commit murder, you have been found guilty by a jury of that count. You are adjudicated guilty, and you will be sentenced to a consecutive sentence of 30 years in the Department of Corrections.
Catherine was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 2 additional 30-year sentences. The court made it clear there would be no second chances. In court, Catherine Magbanua sat motionless as the judge delivered her life sentence. For years, she denied any involvement, claiming she was just a middlewoman and that she had no idea what Charlie Adelson was planning. But the evidence told a different story. When the words life in prison echoed through the courtroom, Catherine closed her eyes, exhaled sharply, and shook her head. For the first time, the reality of her fate had sunk in. No more excuses, no more appeals for leniency, no way out.
Destroyed as well. The lives of Dan's 2 sons, my grandchildren, were forever turned upside down as a result of this crime.
Meanwhile, Daniel Markel's family, who had waited 8 long years for justice, embraced in relief. Their fight was finally over, but the loss of their son, brother, and father would never be erased. Catherine had played her part in a cold-blooded execution, and now she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, paying the price for a murder that should never have happened. Next, we turn to the case of Tia Young, whose devastating decisions shook those around her, raising questions about trust, betrayal, and the consequences of unchecked anger.
She began to add things that didn't make sense. When we spoke with Tim, it was the same thing. The story was not the same about when they saw each other. Now he had done things that he hadn't mentioned before.
On November 6, 2017, George Young was shot and killed outside his home in Beaufort, Georgia. His wife, Tia Young, had just lost her husband of 22 years, the father of their 3 children, in what seemed like a random act of violence. Tia appeared heartbroken, and her tearful plea for justice was broadcast to the public. She even set up a GoFundMe account to help with funeral expenses. Months after George Young's tragic death, the truth began to unravel unexpectedly. At first, Tia Young's grief seemed genuine as she mourned her husband's loss. However, as the investigation continued, the story took a shocking turn. Police soon arrested Tia and her lover, Harvey Lee, for George's murder. It was revealed that Tia and Harvey had been having an affair, and together they had planned to kill George to claim his $1 million life insurance policy.
He's eliciting hearsay statements.
The defense not holding back on the state's first witness, Young's former boss and friend, Rob Strickland.
He was my go-to guy.
As detectives dug deeper, they found numerous inconsistencies in the stories that Tia and Harvey had been telling. Tia's initial heartbreak and emotional plea for help started to fade, and her behavior became increasingly suspicious. New evidence began to surface, including messages and phone records showing the affair. It became clear that their actions were not those of grieving loved ones, but rather two people involved in a calculated scheme for financial gain. The investigation revealed a web of lies, with Tia and Harvey's actions betraying the trust of a family who believed in their love and loyalty. Their plot, once hidden, was exposed, leaving the community in disbelief over the betrayal and heartbreak that led to George's death. As the trial began, the evidence against Tia and Harvey started to pile up. The jury learned that after George was shot, Tia waited between 5 to 10 minutes before police had come. That alone raised suspicions, as it seemed unusual for a wife to delay reaching out for help after her husband was shot. Investigators also found that the murder weapon was never recovered, and both Tia and Harvey's stories didn't line up. Their accounts had many contradictions, which made it harder for the court to believe their version of events. Further investigation uncovered text messages and photos revealing the affair between Tia and Harvey, exposing the secret they had tried to keep hidden. One of their neighbors even witnessed Harvey tampering with evidence, making it clear that they were trying to cover up their actions. The jury was shocked by how deep the betrayal went.
And I felt like maybe that had something to do with it, but I wasn't sure.
Detectives were stunned.
Tia and Harvey weren't just the grieving spouse and supportive lover they had pretended to be. They were the ones responsible for George's death. The truth was undeniable now. The people who should have loved and protected George were the very ones who plotted his murder for financial gain. Tia and Harvey were both convicted of murder. Tia was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 3 years, while Harvey received a sentence without the chance of parole. But Tia has no remorse for her act. The case was a heartbreaking reminder of the lengths some will go for money and how betrayal can come from those closest to us.
She will spend in prison. A jury found Tia Young guilty of felony murder, aggravated assault. Her alleged lover, Harvey Timothy Lee, was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault.
The story of George Young's murder left everyone in shock. The woman who cried on camera, pleading for help, was revealed to be behind the death of her husband. The betrayal, lies, and manipulation showed how a family can be torn apart by greed and deceit. It was a tragic and emotional case that raised many questions about trust, love, and the dark side of human nature. The actions of these ruthless killers left scars that will never heal, and their cold-blooded crimes continue to haunt the world. But their stories are just the beginning. The next video on screen takes you deeper into shocking cases and the sentences that left the world in disbelief. Keep watching. You won't want to miss this.
It didn't have to be Colton. It could have been anybody that I was like, hey, do you want to chill? Anybody that could have came to my house, that could have happened to them.
Why?
What do you mean, why? Because people are nasty. People do mean things.
Not just once, not twice, but 3 times. Do you understand what you did? Do you understand? Just let us know that you understand and you apologize.
Behind the tearful apologies and heartfelt pleas lies a shocking truth. Some women commit unthinkable crimes. From Aylin Alderet's ruthless acts of violence to Elsa Segura's deadly betrayals, these cases reveal the darkest side of human nature. These deadliest female killers give dramatic reactions to the sentences that seal their fates. Let's begin.
Your Honor, the defendant, she actually could have been a hero. She could have been a hero. She could have warned Monique.
On December 31st, 2019, a promising young realtor named Monique Baugh left her home to meet a potential client. She was hardworking, caring, and a loving mother of 2 little girls. However, what began as an ordinary appointment quickly spiraled into a horrifying ordeal that would devastate her family. Monique had been contacted several times by a woman named Elsa Segura, who claimed to be interested in buying a home. What Monique didn't know was that Elsa was setting a deadly trap. When Monique arrived at the vacant property, 2 men, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis, kidnapped her. They tied her up with duct tape and forced her into a moving truck. The nightmare didn't end there. The kidnappers drove to Monique's home in Minneapolis. Using her keys, one of them broke in and shot Monique's boyfriend multiple times in front of their 2 little girls, ages 3 and 1. Despite his serious injuries, He survived and managed to call for help, but Monique was still in danger.
Back in 2019, well, she never showed up to that house. Two of her boyfriend's friends did, Cedric Berry and Barry Davis. Court documents say they put her into a U-Haul.
About an hour later, Monique was taken to an alley in Minneapolis. There, she was shot 3 times and left alone in the cold. The news of her death devastated her family and friends. She was a beloved mother and a rising star in real estate. The crime was cruel, senseless, and heartbreaking. The investigation quickly uncovered the truth. Elsa Segura had lured Monique into the trap using a burner phone, which was bought by her co-defendant Cedric Berry. The police charged 5 people, including Elsa. Cedric Berry and Barry Davis were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Another accomplice, Shantae Berry, received probation for helping them. Elsa Segura's case went to trial, but in 2022 her conviction was overturned by the Minnesota Supreme Court, leading to a retrial. Rather than face another trial, Elsa chose to plead guilty. On this day, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison for her role in the crime. The judge agreed to a harsher sentence due to the cruelty of the murder and the involvement of multiple people. However, Elsa showed no guilt for her act.
This time asking Judge Peter Cahill to send Elsa Segura to prison for the rest of her life without the possibility of parole. It was Segura who made the phone calls luring Bao, a local real estate agent.
This case is a painful reminder of how greed and betrayal can lead to tragedy. Monique's family will never get her back, but her memory lives on in the hearts of her loved ones and her 2 daughters. Elsa Segura's sentence holds her accountable, but nothing can erase the pain Monique's family feels.
It's sad that she lost her life for somebody else's decisions in life.
Through it all, the community stands with the Baugh family, hoping they find some peace and justice in the wake of their unimaginable loss. Elsa's story shows how someone she trusted led her into a deadly trap. But as the next case shows, some crimes go beyond recklessness into the realm of calculated violence.
She just a good person. And we miss her.
On August 12, 2016, a heartbreaking crime shook the small community of Afton, Tennessee. The body of 21-year-old Jessie Nicole Morrison was discovered on the side of the road. She had been brutally attacked, and the cause of her death was determined to be blunt force trauma. The tragedy was even greater because Jessie was 4 months pregnant at the time. The investigation started when Gary Ely, who was Jessie's fiancé at the time, lived with her and her 2 sons at the Cross Anchor Trailer Park. On the day of the murder, August 12, 2016, he was at work from 6:30 a.m. until 7:10 p.m., providing a concrete alibi. Additionally, he saw Jessie during his lunch break when she dropped off their shared car and left with Vonda Smith and her 2 sons in Vonda's white Sunfire. Ely was presumed to be the father of Jessie's unborn child. This search for answers left investigators down a path no one expected. As they pieced together the evidence, one name stood out: Vonda Starr Smith, a grandmother from Greene County. The news spread quickly, leaving the community in shock. How could someone known for caring for others be accused of such a horrible crime? Whispers of disbelief filled the town. Neighbors struggled to accept that someone they trusted could be behind such a brutal act. Yet, the evidence pointed directly to Vonda. However, Vonda refused to accept the blame. She insisted she was innocent, claiming the truth had been twisted against her. The courtroom became a battleground, a place where grief, anger, and determination collided. On one side stood the prosecutors, fighting for justice for Jessie and her unborn child. On the other hand, Vonda and her defense team are determined to prove her innocence. Law enforcement worked day and night to uncover the truth. Clue by clue, their investigation led to one person, Vonda Starr Smith. The shocking discovery left everyone in disbelief. Vonda, a grandmother from Greene County, was charged with the murder of Jessie Nicole Morrison and her unborn child. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with tension. Jessie's family sat with heavy hearts, hoping for justice. However, Vonda was smiling and hugging her son.
Issued an opinion affirming the judgments of the trial court against Smith.
The prosecution presented the evidence, painting a clear picture of what had happened. Meanwhile, Vonda's defense fought back, but the truth was undeniable. Finally, on May 25, 2018, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on both charges. The courtroom fell silent as the judge announced Vonda's punishment: life in prison for Jessie's murder and an additional 25 years for the death of Jessie's unborn child. The news brought a bittersweet feeling. Justice had been served, but it could never bring Jessie back. Her family felt the weight of their loss, knowing they would never see her bright smile again.
She is very relieved that the charges has finally come down and that his arrest has been made, and hoping that in the future that justice will be done.
Though the trial ended, Jessie's memory remained alive in the hearts of those who loved her. Her story became a reminder that every life matters and justice will always have its day. Even after her sentencing, the conflict continued. Smith appealed the ruling, claiming the evidence was insufficient and that her rights had been violated during the trial. She argued that the court failed to provide information about a cell phone signal and made errors during the trial. However, on February 24, 2021, the Court of Criminal Appeals at Knoxville upheld the original ruling. Smith's appeal was denied, and her life sentence remained in place. And as the verdict was read, tears started to shed on her face.
Vonda Smith was found guilty in the death of 21-year-old Jessie Morrison, who was pregnant at the time.
The community felt a mixture of sorrow and relief. Jessie and her unborn child were gone far too soon, but justice had been served. This case reminds us of the pain caused by violent crimes and the importance of holding those responsible accountable. Jessie's story will never be forgotten, and her memory will live on in the hearts of those who loved her.
Her kids were alive, and she lost her life for her kids.
Justice was served for Jessie and her unborn child. And in our next case, another act of deception led to a horrifying kidnapping and murder that shook an entire nation.
This is the house.
Yep.
This is the porch. This is the driveway.
Okay.
There's a tree line. The driveway is about this wide.
Okay.
We pulled in. This is the house. This would be the back of the house.
Okay.
So this is the porch right here. There's a house part right here.
On a summer night in 2016, an 18-year-old college baseball player, Colton Thomas Shearer, was spending his break at home in Middleburg, Florida. He had a bright future ahead of him, but everything changed when a robbery turned deadly, ending his life in a moment of violence. Colton had been lured to a house on County Road 16A by someone he thought was a friend, Alexandra Grace Schreffler. Unbeknownst to him, she had been approached by three men, Jordan Coleman, Taureen Johnson, and Ozell McNabb Jr., who wanted to find someone to rob. Schreffler chose Colton from her Facebook friends. As the police searched for answers, the heartbreaking truth came to light. Colton had been betrayed by someone he trusted. What started as a meeting between friends quickly turned into a nightmare. The night of the robbery, chaos erupted inside the house. Gunshots echoed through the air, and Colton was critically wounded. His friend, David Cody Levo, was also hurt but managed to escape with another friend, Tyler Bashers. Desperately, they rushed to a nearby gas station for help, but it was too late. Colton's life had already slipped away. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered more crimes linked to the suspects. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb had also broken into a sheriff's deputy's patrol car, stealing weapons that would cause even more harm. But the law caught up with them. All four were arrested and their plans of greed and violence came to an end. The loss of Colton was devastating, but justice was served for his family. His mother said in court, "I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night."
I hold you the most responsible for Colton's death. Had it not been for your senseless actions of luring him there that night.
His story remains a reminder of how precious and fragile life truly is. Justice came slowly, but surely. Schreffler, initially charged with murder and armed robbery, struck a deal. She pleaded guilty to armed robbery and agreed to testify against the others. She received 15 years in prison. Coleman, Johnson, and McNabb faced harsher punishments, with sentences ranging from 25 to 30 years behind bars. However, she showed no remorse.
Schreffler pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of armed robbery and agreed to testify against her co-defendants.
Colton Shearer had dreams, talent, and a life ahead of him, but a senseless act of greed took it all away. His family and friends were left to mourn his loss, knowing his bright future had been stolen. Justice was served, but no sentence could bring peace to Colton's family. His story is a heartbreaking reminder that betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. The next case shows how a ruthless car crash takes an innocent life.
He was amazing, smart, intelligent, helpful. He's an amazing young man.
On October 31st, 2018, in Las Vegas, Nevada, a family's life changed forever. A high-speed DUI crash ended the life of 8-year-old Levi Ekshanique and left his parents with severe injuries. The driver responsible for the crash was 25-year-old Aylin Alderette. This heartbreaking case shook the community and became a reminder of the deadly consequences of driving under the influence. Aylin Alderette was driving at 103 miles per hour when she crashed into the Eshenique family's car at an intersection. Investigators determined that she had been under the influence of alcohol and drugs at the time of the crash. Dashcam and surveillance footage from nearby businesses captured the devastating moment, showing how the impact caused the family's vehicle to spin out of control before coming to a violent stop. Emergency responders arrived at the scene within minutes, but the damage had already been done. Levi was pronounced dead at the hospital, while his parents, Jose and Bridget, suffered life-threatening injuries. The impact was devastating. Levi's brother Joey shared how deeply the loss affected him, saying, "Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right." The Eshenique family and their loved ones wore shirts with the words "Justice for Levi, for the love of Levi," as they stood together in the courtroom seeking justice. During the sentencing, Levi's family shared their pain and heartbreak. His mother, Bridget, spoke about her unimaginable loss. She recalled waking up from her injuries, believing her sons were safe at school, only to learn that Levi was gone. She said, "My son was 8 and will never age another day." His father, Jose, expressed his sadness, saying, "She stole my baby boy that I will never see again. Her family can still visit her. My baby boy was 8.
Unfortunately, it was my vehicle that she hit. She stole my baby boy. I can never see again."
Alderette sobbed through the hearing, apologizing to the family. She said, "I'm so sorry for the family I hurt. I wish I could return to that horrific day and change everything." Her defense attorney shared that she had faced a difficult life, suffering from mental illness and trauma, but the prosecutor argued that her actions still required accountability. The judge sentenced Aylin Alderette to 26 to 65 years in prison, the maximum sentence for a second-degree murder and 2 counts of DUI causing substantial bodily harm. She was also ordered to pay the family $467,000 in restitution. At the time of sentencing, she breaks down in court after hearing her sentence.
Levi was killed after Aylin Alderette drove with 4 times the legal limit of marijuana in her system and smashed into the Echenique's car.
Levi's older brother Joey said that giving her the maximum sentence was the best birthday present my brother could get. Levi would have turned 9 years old just days after the sentencing.
Every time I think about it, I just can't control myself. What she did was not right at all. Like my mom said, the best birthday present that my brother could get.
This case reminds us of how one reckless decision can cause irreversible pain. Levi's family will forever carry the heartbreak of losing their beloved son and brother. Although the sentence cannot bring Levi back, his family found some peace knowing that justice was served. The tragedy stands as a powerful reminder to never drive under the influence and to always consider the safety of others.
Levi's parents say the outpouring of support from the community is a testament to the kind of kid Levi was.
Levi's loss is a stark reminder of how one thoughtless action can destroy lives. However, in the next case, the victim survived the attack, but the physical and emotional scars will never fully heal.
Did you ever tell Jessica that you were pregnant?
Yes, sir. My sister was on top of me, covering my mouth, trying to choke me.
On October 6, 2013, a shocking act of violence shattered a family in Milani Maka when Jessie Heinbaugh and her boyfriend Michael Ayala betrayed someone they should have protected, Jessica's sister, Casey Ann Jones. Casey, who was 2 months pregnant, endured a terrifying attack at the hands of the very people she should have been able to trust the most. The brutal betrayal by her sister and Ayala turned what should have been a bond of love and protection into a horrifying ordeal that would leave lasting scars. That day, Jessica and Michael choked and stabbed Casey, leaving her with serious injuries. However, the physical pain was only part of her suffering. Her greatest fear was for her unborn baby's life. The police launched an immediate investigation, gathering evidence from the crime scene, which included blood-stained items and a kitchen knife identified as the weapon used in the attack. Investigators also obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera, which captured Michael Ayala arriving and leaving the scene. During police interviews, Casey provided a harrowing account of the attack, describing how Jessica and Michael showed no mercy. Medical reports confirmed multiple stab wounds and bruising consistent with strangulation, supporting Casey's testimony. Authorities charged Jessica Heinbaugh and Michael Ayala with attempted murder, citing clear intent to kill. Prosecutors argued that the brutality of the attack, along with Casey's vulnerable state due to her pregnancy, proved premeditation. The case went to trial, and Jessica did not deny what she had done. She laughs at the time of trial. Her public defender, Darcia Forrester, shared that Jessica had fully accepted her guilt and the punishment that awaited her. She knew there would be no escaping the consequences of her actions, but for Casey, the wounds ran deeper than what anyone could see. The attack stole her peace and happiness during a time that should have been filled with joy and excitement, dreaming about her baby's future. No matter what happened in court, Casey's life would never be the same. During the sentencing, a powerful letter from Casey Ann Jones was read aloud in court. In her heartfelt words, she shared how the attack forever changed her life. It didn't just leave her with physical scars, it stole her peace, her trust, and the joy she had felt about becoming a mother. Casey wrote about how instead of celebrating her pregnancy, she spent her days in fear. She no longer felt safe in her own home. Simple things like locking doors or making sure every knife was in place became part of her daily routine as she tried to protect herself and her unborn child. Through her letter, Casey made it clear that the damage went beyond her injuries. It was something she carried in her heart every day. She wanted the court to know that the actions of Jessica and Michael had taken far more from her than anyone could see.
How did this talk make you feel?
Horrified. I was being attacked by someone I loved and trusted.
She wrote that her daughter suffered the most, growing up in the shadow of an unimaginable crime. She would never meet the people who had caused so much pain, but their actions had forever changed her life. Casey begged the court to ensure that Jessica and Michael never had the chance to harm anyone else again. On Tuesday, Jessica Heinbaugh was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. However, she had no shame for her act. Michael Ayala's sentencing would follow later. For Casey, justice had been served, but the scars of that night would never fully fade. The tragic stories in these cases reminds us of the irreversible pain caused by betrayal, violence, and reckless decisions. Their courtroom moments reveal the deep scars left behind and highlight the consequences of unimaginable crimes. In our next video on screen, we'll take you deeper into more shocking stories and the sentences that left the world speechless.